The Launchpad Pro's mode buttons, the custom modes, the shift button, and an overview of all the remaining buttons and connections on the Launchpad Pro. All this and more coming up right now on this episode of Pro Music Creator. This video is the second in a series of videos covering all of the features of the Launchpad Pro Mk3. Before we get started, if you're new to the channel, welcome and thanks for joining us. I'm Ken Ramirez and this is Pro Music Creator, where we all become pros at producing and making music together. By the end of this video series, hopefully we'll all be pros at the art of using the Novation Launchpad Pro Mk3 to create, produce, and perform music. So, if you wish to learn everything there is to know about the Novation Launchpad Pro, stay tuned by subscribing to this channel and turning on the notifications so you'll be alerted each time I post a new video in this series. Before diving into the details of the Launchpad Pro, let's get an overview of the top side and the back of the Launchpad Pro. The top has several important sections, each containing several buttons within each section. First, you'll notice that some buttons have two commands on them. The first command is written in large text, and this is the default action when you press the button. The smaller text shown under the main command name is executed by first holding the shift button. In other words, these buttons have two functions. The first action doesn't require any additional button, while the second action requires that you first press the shift button and hold the shift button until the action button is actually released. The top row holds the left and right arrow buttons and the mode buttons, which include the session, note, chord, custom, and sequencer buttons. Also, in this row is the projects button. We'll cover in detail what each of these buttons does within this and the remaining future videos. The projects button also contains the save button, which requires that you first hold the shift button as already explained. The up and down arrows are on the left side of the front panel below the shift button. Below these buttons, you'll find clear, duplicate, quantize, and fixed length buttons along with secondary commands accessible via the shift button. Finally, you'll find the play stop buttons and the capture MIDI button. On the right side, you'll find the scene buttons for each row, along with secondary actions which require the shift button in order to execute those commands. These include patterns, steps, pattern settings, velocity, probability, mutation, microstep, and print to clip buttons. The bottom row contains the setup button, along with two rows of buttons. The top row contains the track select buttons, and the bottom row contains the commands that can be applied to the individual tracks, such as record, arm, mute, solo, volume, etc. Each of these buttons on the bottom row contains the secondary actions that require the shift button to execute. Note that some buttons act as toggle buttons. In other words, they have an on-off component to them. As an example, if you mute a track using the mute button, it remains enabled until you click it again, which then disables it. The button indicates the difference between on and off using the red and green lighting. The back panel contains the USB-C socket for connecting the Launchpad to your computer, along with the MIDI in and two MIDI out ports, which were provided using TRS MIDI jack format, which basically requires that you plug in the included TRS MIDI jack cable to the port in order to connect a standard MIDI cable to it. Now, let's go over the modes and why the Launchpad provides them. But before we do that, if you're finding some value in this video, it would absolutely help the channel out if you could click the like button. Your support is much appreciated and goes a long way towards helping and sharing this content with others. Now back to the regularly scheduled content. The modes are what gives the Launchpad the power to switch between the various functions you'll need to perform in order to use the Launchpad in a very clean and straightforward manner. Each mode contains a different view and essentially causes the grid buttons to switch functionality in order to support the chosen mode. If you select the session button, for example, then the grid will represent the session view of your DAW. If you're in Logic, this is where you'll match your Logic's Live Loops view. If you're in Ableton Live, you'll be mapped to the session view. There are 5 different modes to choose from. These include Session, Note, Chord, Custom, and Sequencer. We'll cover each of these modes in upcoming videos with all of the details and the niceties. Once you click one of the mode buttons, you are placed into that mode and remain in it until you select another mode. You'll notice that once you select the mode, the button is lit with a light green color while the other modes are lit in white. Selecting another mode changes the current mode button to white and the selected mode button to a light green. Even though the project's button is on the same row as the other modes, it's not exactly a mode. It's more like a sub-mode of the sequencer mode. It allows access to your saved sequencer projects. In addition to the standard provided modes, the Launchpad Pro provides 8 custom modes accessible via the Custom Mode button. These custom modes allow you to control your hardware and software via MIDI. Pressing the custom button places you in the most recently selected custom mode. If none were selected yet, the default is the custom mode number 1. You can select any of the 8 custom modes with the track buttons. You must first enter the custom mode and then you press the track button to select one of the 8 custom modes. After pressing the track within the custom mode, the track light is lit in light green to let you know that is the currently selected custom mode. The others are lit in white. Novation provides a software application for Windows and Mac appropriately named Novation Components, which allows you to edit each of these custom modes and provides the grid with the specific functionality you wish for it to control when pressed within these modes. If that doesn't make sense, we'll get into the specifics and see some demonstrations in a future video. So make sure you subscribe to this channel and turn on the notifications so you'll be alerted each time I post a new video in this series. The last thing I'd like to cover is a little detail about the Shift button. The Shift button provides the ability to access the commands listed by the small text on several of the buttons throughout the front panel of the Launchpad Pro. For example, if you wish to access the Save command to save the current sequencer project, you'll need to hold down the Shift button first and continue to hold it down while you press the Save command located on the same button as the project's command. Then you can release both buttons together. By holding the Shift button, you cause the button to act as a save button rather than putting it into the project load mode. Note that when you hold the Shift button down, the possible buttons that would be accessible will change their light to gold. If the button is more of an on-off toggle button, it will be lit red when it is disabled or green when enabled. You'll see some of these examples in future videos. Keep in mind that the availability of a given function will be accessible if it is in that given mode. For example, the Save command is only accessible if you are in the sequencer mode. I'll cover examples of these as we come across them in the sequencer section of this video series. So if you don't want to miss the remaining videos in this series, make sure you click on the subscribe button and turn on the notifications so you won't miss any. Thanks, and see you next time.